Hello, friends. This is Chandrakant from Akulmac Technologies, and today we are in company of a very accomplished leader from IBM. Her name is Melissa Sassi, and she joins us from SFO, and she is the chief penguin of IBM. Melissa, welcome to the Likeable Leaders segment of our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope I'm a likable leader.
Oh, of course, I mean, you are such a popular leader. You are world famous, so you are definitely a likable leader.
Wow,
Um, I,
my head might explode.
but I think we will understand your journey today. And for the benefit of our viewers, your journey has to be conveyed to the people so that they can get inspired by things that you have done right and things that you have not done right. So I think this discussion is about all of that.
Awesome.
So
Good. I'm here. I'm ready. Fire away your questions. I think I have answers.
Melissa, you had such a versatile journey. So, to begin our program, I just want to say, as an overview, I mean, we have a lot of questions, but as a start of an overview, where it's all started and how you became what you are today.
Yeah, my journey is one of taking my worst nightmare and turning it into my superpower. And what I mean by that is about 13 years ago, my children and I became victims of parental kidnapping. And my children, they're safe, they're healthy, they're normal adjusted kids, but I never got them back. We're still in contact. They know they have a mother who loves them, and they know that this was not something that I opted for, I chose, or I even imagined. And I think a lot of people ask me, well, wait a second, how can something so awful turn into something that is a superpower? Like, unpack that for me. My daughter one day, and this is about 5 years ago, she said to me, and I was working at Microsoft at the time, and she said to me, Mommy, I'm learning Microsoft. And I'm going to walk with us while I let my dog get out of my office. So forgive me. She's scratching at the door. And if I don't do it now, she's going to give me a, there we go. All right. We're all working from home these days. And as much as we want to handle our distractions in a way that um, we have distractions these days. All right, now let's go back to my superpower. So she said to me, Mommy, I'm learning Microsoft. I'm like, what do you mean you're learning Microsoft? That's her accent. She's got a bit of a French Arabic accent because she has spent most of her life now in Tunisia. So sandwiched in between Algeria and Libya, the spark of the Arab Spring. The Jasmine Revolution that essentially changed Tunisia and the region, some for the good and some maybe for the not so good. But I tried to figure out, like, what do you mean you're learning Microsoft? And I realized that she was learning Word in her classroom, and she didn't have access to her own computer, and neither did her classmates. 30, 40 kids shared a computer, and she would go to the front of the class when it was her turn and file, open, type, and all the things you do with Microsoft Word. And I thought, wow, how can any young person really learn to become a creator, a maker, and a doer, empowered by technology as opposed to a consumer of technology if they're not exposed, through either formal or informal education. And so my daughter, was talking about how she learns in her classroom, and my kids had technology at home. So, laptop, tablet, phone, I got all of those things for them because I'm essentially a digital mother. I know that sounds kind of strange, for those who have not went through something that I've went through. And, everybody handles their things, their nightmares, their tragedies in different ways. But I thought, there may be there may be something I can do about this. I mean, hey, I work at Microsoft, and so I went back to my leadership team and, found a way to get computers into her classroom. And what kind of started from, hey, let me get my kids some computers, ended up becoming a program between Microsoft and HP, where we sent 400 laptops to 20 Tunisian schools, and a collaboration with the Ministry of Education. And I started thinking about, what is it that, technology can bring young people. And I realized that it's not just having a device. It's not just having access to the internet, which, by the way, only 50% of the world has access to the internet, actually 52%. And I realized that, a big piece of making meaningful use of the technology in front of you, whether that's a physical device or, internet access, is skills, digital skills. And as I started my journey of thinking about how can they make meaningful use of these devices, I thought there's a place for me. And I may not be an engineer, I may not be an architect, but I know a lot of engineers. And what if I were to, collaborate with some university students in Tunisia? And what if we were to travel around and spend 3 weeks teaching young people to code? Not necessarily coming up with a solution that would empower, all of these young people to all of a sudden launch their own business and, become the next best coder. But I thought, why don't I go out and demystify computer science and run some workshops, with young people, exposing them to computer science and enabling them to learn how to talk to computers, how to program computers to do what you want to do. And so me and 3 or 4 young students had a trunk full of laptops, and thanks to HP, we traveled around the country teaching young people to code. And what was kind of the beginning of all this was really just a summer vacation of giving forward in the community and, feeling good about empowering young people, through tech. And every time we went to a town, sometimes the mayor would show up. Sometimes we'd have banners all over a town center. We had the National Guard show up, and we kind of looked around and didn't realize, that we were setting off to do something that, empowered people to transform their lives and the world. And we came back home from this 3-week journey, all of us in this stinky car, me and, 4 engineers and our trunk full of laptops. And we're sitting in the capital of Tunisia, in Tunis. And I said, guys, gang, this wasn't just a summer vacation. We have a company, and we have something that will not just change the life of Zahra, Zahran, and Yumna, my kids, but these are the skills that will empower young people to prepare for the future of work. And there's a huge gap. None of these kids had ever been exposed to computer science, didn't even know what it was. And this is not just something that is relevant in Tunisia. It's relevant on the continent of Africa, the region, the Middle East and Africa, and the world. And so we launched the company. And I think a few years later, fast forward to today, my life's work is digital inclusion and technology entrepreneurship. And that's all about empowering young people through access to such skills. We've now taught tens of thousands of young people to code in 12 countries, and it's fueled a career shift for me. So I now am a CEO and founder of 2 companies, and I also am the global head of a startup program at one of the largest tech companies on the planet, thanks to my daughter one day saying, "Mommy, mommy, I'm learning Microsoft."
What a story, Melissa. I think nobody can tell a tragedy and say that, hey, I turned the tragedy and my personal experience into my superpower. I think it's quite inspirational, and people who can, because most of us live in a very cozy environment and we don't see the hardship. So I think, thanks for sharing some of the personal side of you. I think it's quite inspirational.
Thank you. It's taken me a long time to be able to figure out, how to transform that experience into something positive, and not just positive for me and my outlook on the future, my mental health, my physical health, but, it's also been something that I think has empowered, many young people from around the world. I often write recommendation letters for the students who participate in my program. And at one time, a large percentage of my students actually receive scholarships to come and study in the US for a year or 4 years. A large percentage of them are very interested in international experience and cross-cultural dialogue, because one of the things that I do in my camps is we think about problem solving, we think about solving world challenges, we think about bringing in world leaders who are doing really interesting things in technology and entrepreneurship. So when these young people are going out and learning to code, they're not just going out to learn to build things for the sake of building things. They start off with, what are some big wicked problems in the world, in your community, and how does it impact you and your family or you and your friends? And how can you create locally relevant and locally generated businesses and technology versus expecting everything to come in from Silicon Valley, but creating local leaders through this concept of how do you empower young people through problem solving, through critical thinking, crucial, how to have crucial conversations, how to manage your reputation and your personal brand. But how do you get those core skills, those core technical skills where you can hands-on build a mobile application or an IoT device that connects into a mobile application or an e-commerce solution, or even just a plain old website.
So I think you must have had a lot of challenges while doing your work or doing charity or enhancing the life of these youths with regard to language. So in Tunisia, do they speak French or?
Arabic and French. It's a version of Arabic, and actually I taught myself the local dialect. I'm not perfect and I can't read or write, but I am competent. And I've done TV interviews, I've done radio interviews in the local dialect, and I always start out my camps when I'm there. I'm not always there because my team really handles everything locally. And my team, by the way, is all youth-led and youth-run. So I have one person under the age of 35. Everyone else is, I have one person between 25 and 30, and then everyone else is under the age of 25. In Tunisia, a lot of young people now are quite competent in English. Previously, the older generation or previous generations learned French and Arabic, and a lot of the school stuff was in French. The educational system is still very kind of French and very theoretical in fashion. So a lot of young people, finish school, finished university without having practical experience, because they've spent a lot of time memorizing things, but not necessarily knowing how to put those things into place practically. So that's kind of one of the other things that I think about. But I've been going back and forth to Tunisia for many, many, many years. I usually am there several times a year. I usually spend my summers there. So many times I'm around people who do not speak English and only speak Arabic or French. So I've picked up the dialect and tried my best. I'm very good with languages. I lived in France for a year. My French is not great, but I'm okay in French. And then I also am fluent in Spanish.
So this shows that when there is a will, there is always a way to pick up different languages, even though they are from a different segment. So, I mean, French and Spanish are from the Latin segment. So, but I think it's good. I think
my Italian is not bad either. I can, and sometimes I can read okay and figure out the gist of things in Portuguese. I can't speak Portuguese, but it's my brain, for whatever reason, is able to pick up languages by hearing, and I can recognize patterns. I don't know why, and I don't know why my brain works like that. It just does when it comes to language. And I have some people say when it comes to linguistics that I have a photographic memory. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do remember things, when I hear people using common phrases, and my brain just remembers them.
Very good. So before we move on to the next segment, did you get united with your kids?
Yeah, I see them all the time. We're really close. They haven't come back to the United States. They will when they're old enough to come back. My oldest is waiting for the youngest to get to become old enough to leave on her own, because she doesn't want to leave her there by herself. But it's been a while since I've been there because of COVID-19. I don't mind traveling there, and I would go there in a second, but there are a lot of rules and regulations right now because I only have an American passport. You know, with the COVID-19 situation in the U.S., the U.S. passport is a bit of a challenging piece of paper these days when it comes to travel. But I heard there's some ways around getting into the country. I just haven't explored that yet. I heard if if you're not coming from the US directly, but you're coming from another country that you can travel from, they allow you in, but I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I've heard. So, and I've been a little bit nervous to, I don't know, try that experiment in case I end up getting there and they don't let me in. That would not be so much fun.
Well, the worst that can happen is they can put you in 14 days quarantine. So I think you can take a try. I mean, just try it out. So.
Hopefully I get to pick the hotel. Versus getting thrown in jail or getting thrown in a less than favorable hotel.
I'm sure. I mean, they will not pay for it, so.
But that's okay. Tunisia, I think the currency exchange between Tunisia and the U.S. is pretty good. So usually coming over from the U.S. or Europe or other parts of the world, when you're in Tunisia, is you end up in a good spot.
Great. So, Melissa, in your long career, you have seen so many situations, and you have dealt with all of them. And while dealing with these situations, your evolution as a leader happens. So, would you like to share some experience? How, for example, you shared one of the experience that how the transition happened from Microsoft to getting into a CEO role, but over 2 decades of your entire career, how did you evolve considering the changing scenario of the markets?
Yeah, I think for me, when I first, so I studied international business in university and Spanish. While I was in university, I did a couple of study abroad trips, one to Spain, so that I could be better with my Spanish. I lived with a Spanish family, and they only spoke Spanish to me, so I had to learn. I was forced to learn, which was good because that's what I wanted to do. Because I'm good learning languages by being just immersed in the culture. I did a study abroad trip to Finland. So I spent the summer in Finland and spent a lot of time in Denmark and in Sweden. After I graduated from university, I decided that because I studied international business and I'm from the Midwest in the United States, so the center of the U.S., I really felt like I needed, more international exposure. But I didn't feel quite ready to go and work yet. I didn't feel like I knew enough. I felt like what I'd been doing was very theoretical in nature versus practical, and I hadn't ever really done an internship. So I went off and got my MBA. I studied finance as my kind of focus area, and I spent a year and a half in the UK. So I lived in London for a year and a half. I was planning to go out and work right after that because I felt like, okay, I'm ready, and I stumbled upon a university that had a program where they sent you for a master's, you work with a company, and there are all these benefits. You get a job at that company afterward. And so I thought, well, I hadn't planned on getting a second master's, but it's in France, it's in the south of France, and I get a job out of it. So, hey, why don't I go get another master's? So I did. I studied supply chain or procurement. And I will tell you, it kind of sandwiched me into a career and a job that just wasn't the right fit. I essentially took the first job that I got because I needed to bring in money, and I needed to eat, and I needed to pay for my life. So I took the first job that I got, which was as an analyst in a chemical company. And there was nothing socially good about what I was working on. I came in, I did my work, I earned my money, and I left. And I ended up kind of moving from that to consulting to marketing. And I felt like at that point, like I really wanted to do something more with education, and I wanted to do something more with something more empowering for people in the world. By the way, I did a stint on Wall Street. So I worked at Goldman Sachs. I've worked at BlackRock. So BlackRock, for those of you who don't know, is the largest asset manager in the world. somewhere between like $4 and $6 trillion under management. I was a director at BlackRock and a VP at Goldman. Decided I wanted to go into tech and saw the opportunities of tech being integrated into everything, everywhere that we do, and everything that we have, and that tech touches every single industry. And I realized that I could actually help make the world a better place, make a good salary, and be, and utilize the skills that I have while empowering others. And I didn't realize that a job like that existed. I thought that, you always had to trade off a good salary for doing good in the world. I didn't realize that you could do well while doing good. And so that's something that has been a big fuel of my career. And, I think there's a lot of passion around, I have a lot of passion for my work, whether it's working with early stage entrepreneurs or, young people who are thinking about careers in tech, or keeping underserved communities in tech, whether that's women and girls, the Black community, the Latinx community, or whatever underrepresented group might exist in a particular country. So for me, I think my tragedy fueled a lot of this, because it gave me this altruistic thing that I needed in life. And it wasn't just going in and making a bunch of money on Wall Street. I actually quit my job on Wall Street without having another job. I went in for my performance review, and they asked me, like, what do you want to do next? And I said, I want to put in my resignation. And my boss is like, what do you mean? She was like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to move to Nicaragua and go help make the world a better place. And so I did. I left my big high-paying job on Wall Street, and I moved to Nicaragua and had some fun until I helped to kind of transition my career into, what it is today.
Well, this story reminds me of an Indian movie in which there is an Indian guy, very successful scientist working for NASA, but then he wants to light a bulb. So this whole story is about, from sending satellites into space, coming back to India and lighting a bulb.
There you go.
And you took the name of BlackRock. They were in the news here because they picked up a non-controlling stake in one of the large companies here in India. So
I have a lot of respect for BlackRock. I think they're one of the, one of the companies that really speaks out about, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, about that concept of conscious capitalism, about, doing well while doing good, and that corporations have a responsibility to the world and their shareholders to not just expect the government to pay for, certain social factors in life, but they have, I think, a nice stance when it comes to gender inclusion, Goldman as well, and a nice stance when it comes to making investment decisions and making sure that they've got, women, female representation, in the boards of companies that they invest in, looking at, climate action, and investing in small and medium enterprise. So.
Great. So Melissa, you have achieved a lot in your entire career. Would you like to share something which you feel is the best accomplishment so far?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's finding a way to compartmentalize, my tragedy, if you will, and, turn it into something positive, not just for me, but for others around me, and something that's much bigger than just me. From a career perspective, so that's kind of a life thing, how did I deal with this, and how did I get on versus being a wreck? And don't get me wrong, I was a wreck for 5 years, and sometimes I still am a wreck. Sometimes when I think about things of like, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why didn't I see it? Is it my fault? Did I do something that caused this? And if I would have done this, and this, would we not be here today? But I try not to think too much about the things I can't control, which I can't control the past. It is what it is. But my biggest career achievement so far, and there are quite a few really cool achievements, but one of them was when I was thinking about this device giving program at, between Microsoft and HP, I participated in a hackathon at Microsoft because I saw how difficult it was to get devices outside of, into the hands of nonprofits and into the hands of people without. And I also recognized that at Microsoft they had hundreds of thousands of devices that went into PC Recycle, and these are devices that weren't connected to the network at Microsoft. So areas where there could be no personally identifiable information or trade secrets that could be taken off the devices because they were meant for demos or marketing or in-store and that sort of thing. And I realized that they were only breaking even with this whole PC Recycle thing, so they weren't necessarily even making money off of selling those devices. It was just more a process of getting rid of them to make sure that they didn't end up in a landfill. And so I thought, wow, what if we were to take those hundreds of thousands of devices and put them into the hands of nonprofits, and truly live the mission, Microsoft's mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And I thought, if you don't have access to tech, you don't have access to the internet, how can you really live that mission of empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more? So I created this team as part of the Employee Hackathon, 4,000 teams, more than 100 companies or countries participating, so thousands and thousands of people, around the world. And we won first place in the Inspired Me category, and I had a chance to meet Satya. I pitched to Satya, so the CEO of Microsoft. My Twitter picture, the background is actually me pitching to Satya, so it's a picture of Satya and I. And I stepped in front of him. He was not coming to talk to me. My team said, Satya's coming, you're going to step in front of him. He's going to have a lot of cameras, and you're going to say, Satya, can I tell you about my hackathon project? He won't be able to say no, and this is your opportunity to make a difference. My team was about 50 people strong from all over the world, and I did just that. So he had to say yes, and he said, yes, tell me about your project, and the cameras are rolling. And I told him about my project of, Microsoft having hundreds of thousands of devices that go into the PC Recycle and are not put into the hands of nonprofits or others who could make meaningful use of those devices. And therefore, we weren't truly living our mission of empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And he said, tell me more about this. And so I did. We spoke for 30 seconds, a minute. It was a really quick interaction. He nodded to his person and said, I like this idea. We ended up driving a big change within the company. One of the organizations in the company ended up rolling out a policy that enabled them to make that possible. And they changed the way that they handled PC Recycle activities for devices not connected to their network. It's now a program that's been rolled out worldwide in every single country that Microsoft operates in. And it really fueled a new career for me, and helped me to kind of get where I am today from a career perspective. So it was a hackathon. And it was stepping in front of a big CEO and taking a risk and not being afraid to step in front of the big boss to tell him something that I had in my head that I knew he didn't know about, and I thought he should know.
That's a very good learning that we can have and get inspired after hearing this. The confidence and the drive. I think these are the two key messages that you're giving.
Well, I'm thankful to my team that they enabled that to happen. And what I mean by that is, nothing is you're no good without a team. I don't know everything, and they always say this thing about there's no I in team. And for me, my team inspired me and empowered me and pushed me to take that big risk of stepping in front of one of the most famous, if not the most famous CEO on the planet.
Absolutely. In fact, over the last so many years, the industry is also getting transitioned. We used to see client-server environment very long back, and then we started seeing Windows and Windows-based systems, and then the Apple OS became one of the most preferred operating system, and a lot of changes happened on the server side. So the industry kept migrating and modifying, reinventing. In your career also, you also have changed from the analyst to investors. Now, one of the world largest entrepreneur program. What do you see that is the winning uh, quality or essentials for any entrepreneur who want to get inspired by your story?
I think the biggest thing is to just go and do what you have in your head and not be afraid to take a risk, not be afraid of what might happen if you fail or if things don't go the way you think they're going to go. Surround yourself around a squad of people who will help you recognize that you're not an imposter, that you deserve that seat at the table. You didn't get there by accident. And it might be scary for some people who have never been an entrepreneur before. I became an entrepreneur by accident, and it took me a few years before I said I'm a CEO and founder, and that's how I felt a little bit shy to say that. I don't know why. I'm not a shy person, but I felt like it felt pompous or something, and now I wear it like a badge of honor of, yeah, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, and I deserve my seat at the table. And it's not arrogant for me to talk about the, experience that I have. And it's not arrogant to help, empower others, with those skills by saying, hey, I made it and so can you.
Great. So now you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, you started with empowering young people and youth, but now you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs. So where do you see the industry going from here?
I think that in my role right now at IBM, I focus on fintech, health tech, and insurtech. So for me, I see a lot of innovation happening, but I also think that these small companies should have access to enterprise grade solutions to keep our sensitive data safe. There are a lot of companies out there that have access to our data, and not all of them use our data in the right way. I think that we need to have more control over our data, and I think as consumers or business leaders, we need to make better decisions about technology, about incorporating technical solutions that don't enable people to gain access to our to our data, versus it being managed by policy. I want my data protected by the safest technology on the planet versus a piece of paper that tells an employee what he or she can and cannot do with my data. So I think we'll see a lot of continued conversations around data protection, privacy, and security, and that being both policy led as well as technically led. I think there's a lot of innovation coming in fintech when it comes to payments. I think we'll see a lot of innovation in health tech when it comes to predictive modeling. And, I have a lot of startups that I work with that are doing really cool things when it comes to predictive modeling or bring your own record to your doctor versus relying on your doctor, for example, to have read your medical history and understand all of the different things that might have happened before you came to see that doctor. Those are a few of the areas that I'm thinking about. I mean, I think about like the role that quantum computing, will play. I think about the role that, cloud computing is already playing, and, seeing a lot of, cloud revenue become fragmented, despite some of the larger players, owning big pieces of the market. So lots of fun and cool things, but I think we need to be careful of, that concept around, what are these disruptive technologies? We know there are going to be lots of IoT devices. We talk about the role of 5G. We talk about, the role that AI will play when it comes to, replacing people, which I believe AI doesn't replace managers. AI replaces managers that don't incorporate AI into their work. So you have an opportunity to stay. But 52% of the world is online, right? That means 48% is offline. So while the haves are thinking about what are they doing with 5G and what are we doing with, IoT and, AI and all this sexy stuff, remember 48% of the world doesn't have access to the internet, and large portions of that population may have access, but they can't afford it. And so we are, in turn creating this world of the ultra haves and the ultra have nots. And I think that, as we continue to see technology advance and advance our lives, that divide is going to become bigger and bigger unless we think about how do we actually empower the underserved, through access to the internet, through access to energy, combining those two things together when you're going out and building networks versus going out and building a microgrid and then coming back and getting it, getting that neighborhood connected, but combining those two things together. And again, it's not just about having, technology for the sake of technology so that consumers can go out and consume, but how do you empower people with true digital skills? Not everybody's going to be an engineer, not everybody's going to be a data scientist, but people need to understand how to keep themselves safe online, how to, understand what it means to speak the language of computers. So
I think the IBM is doing a lot of pioneering work, and people like Microsoft, IBM, some of the large companies like HP, they are doing great. And I think a lot of other companies like Starlink is joining to make the Earthlink affordable all across the world, and you can just get it from the sky. So there is no need for laying cables. I think a lot of work is happening, and as you said that there is an AI, virtual reality, a lot of things are happening there, and you also mentioned quantum computing. So a lot of things are happening there as well. Um, are you personally looking at playing some sort of role in any of these?
I think of it on a few different spectrums. If I think about wearing my IBM hat, my whole role is about being an entrepreneur, so an entrepreneur inside of a big company. And, it is my goal that, the 30 startups that I'm adding to my program this year, the 15 that I had last year, so I'll have a total of 45 under my management by the end of this year, that these companies revolutionize fintech, revolutionize health tech, revolutionize insurtech, and that IBM goes to market with some or all of these startups to really think about how can we bring innovation, creativity, new ideas, new business models, new technical, innovations into our enterprise customers, into government. I think there's a wonderful place that startups play when it comes to helping companies innovate. So I would consider myself kind of like a chief innovation officer within, or one of them. I'm not the chief innovation officer, but I would consider myself one of a handful of chief innovation officers, within, my division or within the world of IBM that's really kind of thinking about how can we revolutionize our cloud experience? How do we learn from our customers to help make the experience better? How can we enable them to do the things that they need to do and come up with the innovations that they need to come up with, by giving them the tools that can help fuel that. And how can we help fuel that through them? So I think it's a lot of co-creation and collaboration. I think in my nonprofit world, I'm very focused on how do we empower people through digital skills, professional development, and entrepreneurship so that they can become economically empowered. They can increase their healthcare outcomes. They can gain access to informal education that goes above and beyond what they might be getting in a formal setting, and enabling people through practical experiences so that others can go out and say, okay, what can I do with IoT? What can I do with 5G? What can I do, with the connectivity in front of me? How can I become more economically empowered or socially or politically empowered and be part of the dialogue?
Melissa, it was my greatest pleasure learning from you today. We have come to the end of our discussion today. We have learned a lot. What would be your last message to the budding entrepreneurs?
So I think it's very simple. It's do the thing, whatever that thing is. Go and do it.
So do the thing. Don't hold yourself back. I think that's a very clear message coming from a well-accomplished leader, Melissa. Melissa, Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience,
Thank you.
and have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.